Welcome to the Coast to Coast podcast, brought to you by Play Picks and the Lines. Coming to you from the West Coast, Josh Lander, joined as always by my guy on the East Coast, Nate Weitzer. We are continuing on with these exciting playoffs so far, jumping into Game 5, Utah and the Clippers. We are all tied up at 2 in this series. But the big news, Nate, as we'll get into, is no Kawhi Leonard for Game 5. That affects everything that we are going to talk about here. So we are ready to get into a pretty updated type of game that we'll see between these two. As always, if you still need a FanDuel or DraftKings account, head to fdpicks.com or dkpicks.com. Find all those local listings in your area. So plenty of NBA playoff promos available as well. Make sure you're liked and subscribed to that page. Jump in the comments. Let us know who you guys are betting on. Nate, let's jump into all of Game 5 for this series.
Yeah, so I think the Clippers were plus 2.5 before this news broke on Wednesday morning. Now they're about plus 7.5, plus 240 on the money line. And the total is 221.5. Team totals need to be talked about, at least on FanDuel. The Clippers are at 107.5 and the Jazz 114.5. And that's where I would start. Josh is just saying, I already expect Utah to score a ton at home with that home crowd we've talked about is probably the best in the playoffs at this point. They're 35-6 at home this season. And 4 of their 5 playoff games have gone over the total. They've certainly gone over their team total every time Donovan Mitchell has been active at home. And without Kawhi Leonard, I expect Mitchell to have his way again. I mean, he's just been a scoring machine regardless. Even shooting 9 for 26 from the field last time out, he still winds up with 37 points. So you can always look at his props. However, I would be a little concerned about the blowout factor here. I mean, Kawhi Leonard, I think just neck and neck with Kevin Durant as the most valuable playoff performer in the game. Clearly just carried the Clippers back from a 2-0 deficit yet again. And without him in there, I think the Clippers could just fold. I mean, that's definitely a scenario we could see. So the Jazz over 114.5 would be much more confident for me than the overall total. But if you feel like the Clippers can hang, and they have shown some great schemes, you know, it's not just Kawhi going in one-on-one individually. Yeah. Paul George getting his points, Reggie Jackson as well, because they have found ways to exploit Utah's defense to hunt switches, to get Rudy Gobert out on an island, got him in foul trouble last game. I think that there is a chance they keep this game high scoring, so in which case I would look at a parlay where you can get Jazz minus 1.5 and the over at 223 for nearly plus 200 at FanDuel. But again, yeah, I'm backing the Jazz, who score 121 at home in these playoffs. And you can get more into the difference between their home road splits.
Yeah, it's really interesting actually. If you dive into their road and home splits in the playoffs, as I think we both mentioned recently, it all comes down to pace. There's a big difference in the pace at home versus on the road. Everything is a lot more frenetic in that wild Utah environment, as we mentioned, the crowd being back. And I think that helter-skelter play really works for them, as they've got, always about 4 guys on the floor that can handle the ball standing around Gobert. So they're really comfortable playing up and down like that, especially when you have Donovan Mitchell, who is not afraid to go 1-on-2 or 3 on fast breaks and just get higher than everybody at the rim. We do continue to see if he's a little bit hobbled as he re-aggravates things, but doesn't seem to be enough. Like you can hurt him, but you can't kill him kind of thing. So I feel really great about points as long as Donovan's playing at home for Utah all the time. And then, really what this game's going to come down to, as you mentioned, the only thing scaring me for the points there for Utah is this game close in the fourth quarter? Do we still see the starters for Utah? Because without Kawhi, as you mentioned, you could definitely make the argument that he's the most valuable. It's between he, Durant, and Embiid. I think, honestly, I would vote Embiid, but that's probably another show at this point. Waiting for the NBA playoffs pre-finals MVP award that the NBA will hopefully come out with someday, because that is what we all love to talk about. And that Kawhi is right up there at the forefront of that conversation in terms of putting the team on his back and really specifically looking at what the difference is between his performances averages in wins and losses. When they win, he averages about 10 more points a game this season. And it's interesting because he still averages 26 when they lose. So that's an incredible difference there, obviously, in his performance and how he plays, dictating what happens with this team. And specifically, as we mentioned before Game 4 and why they won Game 3, Kawhi and PG stopped trying to attack the paint so much that they had to face Gobert once they got into the restricted area. They pulled a lot more shots from 15 feet out, and both had a lot more success there, as there's nobody on the Jazz who can really guard them one-on-one when they decide that they want to take pull-up shots in space. So what I'm looking for here is, look, the only thing keeping this game close is our guys like Reggie Jackson, honestly at this point, Luke Kennard, and obviously most importantly, Paul George. Are they going to hit shots from outside? Are they going to still be able to put Rudy Gobert in the blender, as most of the pick and rolls that we saw were Kawhi calling on Rudy's guy, the guy that Rudy was guarding on the Clips, to come and set the screen for Kawhi, as you mentioned, to get those matchups that they wanted around the perimeter. And with that, if guys like Reggie and Paul George aren't able to force that and then kick into the corner for guys like Marcus Morris and like I said, Luke Kennard, who will probably be on there a lot more for offense, they're going to have a lot of trouble scoring points this game. So I think you do feel more comfortable with Utah's total, but the fact of the matter is I still feel pretty good about the overall game total at home. And think we'll see. I do think guys like Marcus Morris and Reggie Jackson will step up enough to at least keep this game close enough. But I'm not feeling comfortable enough to take them. I would still take Utah on points at the very least, or Utah and the money line and over, as you mentioned.
And Terrence Mann should play a big role off the bench as Ty Lue looks to shorten his rotation a little more. You just wonder, if the Clippers zone, how effective it was in LA, how good that's going to be in Utah, where the Jazz, despite their lower shooting in a small sample in the playoffs at home, the Jazz, killed it at home all season, averaging over 17 triples per game. Jordan Clarkson in particular is a guy to watch after he shot just 8 for 28 from the field in those Staples games. He can go off again. Mike Conley is still having a notable absence for the Jazz, but if they get that second scorer out there to give Mitchell a rest, that's when they can really pull away and definitely get to 120 points out there. I would wait and see on his props. A lot of things are frozen right now in terms of the player props as we adjust to the Kawhi news. But Clarkson over. And I don't think Paul George is necessarily going to carry the load like the Clippers need him to. If his points, rebounds, assists are anywhere over 42 or so, I would be taking the under there. I don't think he can thrive as that number one option against a really good defense.
Yeah, it's a good call. And unfortunately, because this game is in Utah for the Clippers, it doesn't bode well for their role players. The trend of role players playing well at home in the playoffs and not nearly as well on the road has continued heavily in these playoffs. A few guys have surmounted that difference. But for the most part, you're seeing those role guys perform differently on the road. That's why I do feel worried about guys like Marcus Morris and even potentially Terrence Mann, who you finally saw get a lot more time in Game 4. It took Ty Lue a second to get him in the game there, but I'm going to look at player props when they come up here for the Clips. But in the meantime, I do still feel good about Donovan, about 32.5 points. And I think you can continue to find some value, like you mentioned, with Clarkson, 17.5 points. I like that as well. So those are two guys that I think will bring the O. That zone defense, especially without Kawhi playing off the ball in the zone as he does, that was one of the main reasons that I think we saw the Clips go into that mode. Is they realized even Kawhi Leonard and Paul George probably can't stay in front of Donovan Mitchell one-on-one, and it really allowed them to have their long arms and passing lanes in a zone. Without Kawhi in your zone, it's a lot less intimidating, especially if you've got someone like Marcus Morris or Zubac or as the guy down low who's really defending the paint against someone like Gobert and even Favors. I don't like that matchup for them, and honestly don't really feel comfortable betting on their role players, but I do think Utah's role players, you can find some value there as they will be putting up some points. So at any rate, Nate, that is all the time that we have for this video. Make sure you are liked and subscribed to that page. We'll be back with another one for that Bucks and Nets game. Probably have a gift card opportunity for y'all in there, so stay tuned. And until we are back, happy betting.